This is going to be one of the most complete breakdowns of probably the fastest growing category. This is going to be the micro jig category. So we got a lot to talk about today, from the jigs themselves to the trailers to the rods and reels. Let's get into it. How's it going, guys? Travis here from Tackle Bros, and today I want to talk to you about something that I'm extremely excited and passionate about, something I spend a lot of time doing, and that is throwing micro jigs. Now, this isn't mini jigs, this isn't compact jigs, this is true micro-sized, little tiny jigs. This has become one of the most effective ways for me to trigger some of the larger bass in a lot of my bodies of water. It's something that they haven't seen a lot. You know, most fish have seen jigs at this point. Most fish have seen, you know, they keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And now we've gotten to that true micro sizing where you're almost getting into, or you are getting into, spinning and BFS applications for a lot of this stuff. Let's start with, what is a jig? A jig is a jig head. Obviously, you're gonna have, obviously a jig hook, and then you're gonna have some skirting material. Now, micro jigs are generally cut a little bit differently. They're gonna have more of a, a couple of longer appendages, and then they're gonna have a finesse jig cut. So this is gonna sort of mop out a little bit, and that's the most common way that all of these are gonna be cut. Now, there are exceptions. The Tugger is a good example of that. So this is the O.S.P Tugger. This is gonna have that, finesse jig style cut. But then we're gonna go completely opposite end of the spectrum here with the Great Lakes Finesse. This is their Great Lakes Finesse jig, which they've actually just left the skirt as long as, this is a very, very long finesse jig with minimal sort of, cut strain. So there's a lot to really take in here, and also head shapes and line ties, and whether it has, this one doesn't actually have a brush guard, which some people are going to prefer, where some of the ones that I seem to use day in and day out have that sort of, mono brush guard. Where do you want to throw these? These can replace full-size jigs, but these are also awesome for targeting open water structure. That's kind of where I've really started to unlock, the usefulness of these jigs, is open water cover. Now, if you're a live scope guy, this is a great tool for targeting specific fish on live scope. You can, pitch this out to them, have it kind of fall, and there's different jigs for doing that, and there's different jigs for, fishing in up and around cover. But this is, it's just one of my most effective tools over the last couple of years. Let's talk the Raid, because I think Raid has really done a phenomenal job with their different models of finesse jigs. So Raid is gonna have 3 different models, okay? We're gonna have the Egu Dama type level, we're gonna have the Egu Dama type cover, and then we're gonna have the Egu Dama type Kiwami. I'm gonna start with the Egu Dama type level. Now, it's gonna look sort of like it has a football shaped head, which, in theory it is. This is gonna be their heaviest hook model. It's gonna have the heaviest guard, it's gonna have the heaviest hook, the most skirting material. It has 2 different sort of thicknesses of skirting material you can see here. So it's gonna have these thicker white ones at the top, and then these really, really thin long ones. And that gives it a beautiful action in the water. Now, this is specifically designed, you can see with that line tie there, that this is specifically designed to sit level in the water. It will have a completely 90-degree action in the water. A lot of times, I'm gonna rig one up actually. Let's do that. So this is the Egu Bug. This is the plastic specifically designed for this guy. One of my all-time favorites. It works so good for this type of application here. So this is the Egu Bug. It's basically a little creature bait. We're going to take it onto this guy. The hook keeper on this, the bait keeper on this is really, really nice on the Egu Dama type cover. I'm gonna pull this skirting down. I'm just going to slowly thread this on. There we go. So this is what it ends up looking like. Just a beautiful sort of creature bait jig style profile. And this will sit perfectly 90 degrees in the water. This specific jig, they actually hang this over branches and appendages and laydowns in the water a lot. Because it's gonna sit 90 degrees, they can control the depth of water that it's gonna sit in, and they can do it from a little bit of distance. So let's say there's a laydown 30 feet away from the boat, they flip it over the laydown, they can kind of control exactly how deep this is moving up and down the column. It's not just gonna sink down because it's hanging over. And that is, you know, one of the most effective ways. Now, with that, you also have to consider getting that fish out of the cover, up back over the, you know, appendage or branch or whatever it is that you've kind of put this over. But that's almost specifically what the type cover was designed, or sorry, the type level was designed to do, is fish. You know, if you have a little branch laying over, you try to get the line up over the branch is gonna hold the line so you can adjust and have this in the perfect depth to sort of, you know, get it right in front of the fish. So this is one of my favorite ways to do exactly that, sort of fish in certain water columns. Now, if you're fishing deeper, because of that line tie where it is, it's gonna allow it to sit perfectly 90 degrees. If you're in 35 feet of water and the fish are up, maybe up in, you know, 25 feet of water, you can kind of get this to sit in that perfect water column on a 90 degrees. Now, specific trailers for the type cover, I will use the Egu Bug a lot. I will also use the Megabass Rock Hog in the 2 or the 2.5 inch. I will also use the Oka Ebi in the 2.5 inch. Also, if you kind of want to get a baitfish profile, you can go with a Keitech Easy Shiner in a 2 to 3 inch or any sort of paddle tail swim bait. It works really, really good on this. Pintail baits work good. So you have a lot of different little things that you can change to sort of profile this exactly how you want. Let's go over to my personal favorite from the Raid lineup. This is the Raid Egu Dama type cover. So this is more of a traditional sort of jig head shape. This is gonna have a smaller hook than the type level, but this one to me is the most versatile. So it doesn't sit perfectly 90 in the water. This is more of a, you know, I will throw this out, I'll kind of let it fall down, let it hit the bottom, but if it wants to sit on bottom, it sits on bottom just fine. The hookup ratio is amazing from there. I can also fish it like a traditional jig, you know, throw it in there, let it kind of fall, lift, let it fall, pull it out. Again, same thing, in and around cover. This is my target specific jig. So if I'm in clearer water and maybe I see a little, you know, a log underwater or a piece of a grass clump and I'm trying to fish the edge of it, this is what I will go to when I'm specifically fishing that. This is gonna have a similar skirt cut to the last one. So these are much more of a dense silicone skirting, and then you have that thinner, you know, more natural moving silicone skirting down at the bottom. This one, I use a lot of Craw style profiles. So I think I had one already done. I did. There's a good example of one of the ways that I rig it up. This is the GLF Snack Craw, one of my favorite trailers for throwing this guy. I will also throw this with a DoLive Craw in the 2-inch size specifically. It pairs perfectly with it. It snugs up really, really nice. The Avi 35 from Raid is another one of my favorites. Those same ones that I spoke about on the last one. And then I also add in the bottle shrimp from Megabass. This is one of my favorites for, you know, all style of cover jig in that micro size. This is just one of those baits right now that has really started to take over fishing. It's a small profile that gets giant fish. If you guys jig fish at all, you know, generally, if you're Texas rig fishing and you're jig fishing, the jig will always produce a little bit bigger of a bite. And this is no different to that. If you're just throwing, you know, regular plastics, sometimes just adding that skirting material so that there's some pulse and movement can upsize your bite. And then this is also a huge draw for fish. So for you guys fishing in like ultra clear water or live scoping, I use this cover one specifically a ton for specific, oh, okay, there's a fish there on live scope 35 feet out. I throw it out, let this thing kind of fall down. The stressful thing is sometimes when the fish are finicky, you can't really move it. So you wait, you pick up the slack. A lot of the time the fish is going to be there. So just another great fish catching. Now let's do the type Kiwami, which is one of my lesser used ones, but it definitely has its place. So this is the smallest size of Egu that they make, and this is purely for sizing in. You can see the hook on that guy is tiny. There's not a specific time where I pick this one up over any others. It's mostly a weight thing. So if I'm looking for one that's going to have a very slow fall rate, say I'm fishing in, you know, shallower water and I can see those fish moving around and I'm just trying to be like a little bit stealthy, I will go with the Kiwami. The hook is very light wire, so you need to have the right gear, which we're gonna get into. I'll explain which rod for which style, but this type Kiwami, it's basically a weight thing, a fall rate thing, shallower water, more finesse than already some of these micro jigs. So these are, again, the 3 different ones from Raid, from obviously the level to the cover to the Kiwami. And you can see between the level and the Kiwami that there's quite a big size difference. This one's gonna have like a full brush guard. This just has like a single mono guard. Also, if you're not a fan of the guards, if you think that the guards are gonna prevent you from your hookup ratio, sometimes I pull them out. You just take a pair of pliers, you pull the whole thing out, it works the exact same. It's nice to have the option. I like to have the option because a lot of times I am in and around grass and it does help just a little bit, not having to clean it off all the time, but you can pull it out, super simple. Okay, let's just talk about some of the jigs. I'm gonna start here with the GLF jig, because this is sort of a unique one. This is one that's newer to the market. I wasn't a fan of how long the skirting was off the top, but I've actually come to appreciate having the option to be able to customize it. It also does a great job with, you know, if you want to upsize your plastic a little bit, it's great for that. This is built on a size 1 Gamakatsu hook. It's super sharp. This is the same hook that they use in some of their other baits. It's gonna have a matte head, which I'm a huge fan of, having that matte baked on style of head. And the colors that they did it in, there's the most simple colors, and that's really what you need when you're working with a jig. The blacks, the green pumpkins, nothing too crazy, unless you're doing something like the level where you do want to sort of have a bait fish profile. This jig, to me, I fish a lot on bottom. So when I'm throwing that snack craw that I showed you guys on the other one, do I have snack craws here? When I'm throwing the snack craw, which is one of my favorite sort of downsized baits, I will fish this ball head on bottom a lot, just kind of scooting it, hopping it along. The skirting on this is a lot thinner. It's gonna be more breathable. So the more subtle your movement is, the more this is gonna pulse and move around, which is nice sometimes. But again, this is sort of a bottom contact style of ball head for me. Super effective fishing in and around cover, rocks, gravel, anything like that. So a cool one from GLF. Keitech has 2 great options in the micro jig category. You're gonna have the mono guard and the spin guard. The spin guard is the smaller of the 2 versions. It's gonna have that super light wire hook. I kind of treat this like the Kiwami. So again, it's gonna be in smaller sizes. This is gonna have a 90-degree line tie, so it does sit a little bit more level in the water if you're trying to let it just sort of fall slowly. This is a nice option. And then that spin guard, it's gonna have that proper brush guard, similar to that Egu type cover. I'm gonna compare these to the Raid ones just because it's easier. Those are the ones that I use most of the time in a lot of my fishing stuff, just because of the 3 options, but all of these are great options. These, I believe, these are on decoy hooks. These are on decoy hooks, which is a great hook. The Tugger is another great one when they make it. O.S.P has made a ton of really good sort of finesse jigs. This is a bigger micro jig in my opinion. They also make a synchro, which is a really good one. And then one of the newest ones we got into the shop is the D-style D-Jig type cover. So this is going to fish similar to that type cover. This is almost an in-between the Kiwami and the type cover, but the hook is closer to the type cover. The weights on this are a little bit smaller. You can see it's more of a bulky jig. The appendages are, it's a little bit thicker of a skirting material, which is nice sometimes. The great thing about this one is the price point. It's pretty affordable little mini jig. So this one from Decoy, this is a dope one that we got in recently. I'm gonna show you guys the options that I brought for trailers really quickly, just so you can refer back to here. Let's start with the 2.1 inch juvie craw, tons of different colors, neutral buoyant, matte. That's sort of the biggest pluses of these. This is gonna be the 2.4 inch rock shrimp from Megabass. Great colors, two very long appendages. Sometimes this is really nice when you're fishing any of these on bottom. We're also gonna have the rock hog. The two sort of claws on this have a lot more action in the water than some of the other ones. It's almost similar to the DoLive Craw, which is one of my favorites. It sort of has a double action. It has two long appendages, and then you're also gonna get the action from the claws on this one, which is great. If you're looking for more of a do nothing and you want the skirt to really talk for itself, I love throwing this guy. This is the Avi 35. And that's honestly similar to that Egu Bug that I was showing you guys earlier. The Egu Bug, although it does have some stuff, it really doesn't do a whole lot other than add bulk in my opinion. It does have some appendages down here, but for the most part, it's more of just a bulk profile for me, which a lot of the time letting the skirt speak for itself is kind of the deal. A couple of other trailers I really love to use are the Deps Bull Flat. Now, this guy I almost exclusively use when I'm really trying to slow it down. So this doesn't go on the type level a whole lot. This goes on the type cover, so it helps slow down that bait's fall rate if I'm pitching at, you know, specific fish. Then also the 2-inch Bellows gill. So this is the smallest size of Bellows gill. If we have this guy in stock, it's a great one to pick up. It only comes in a handful of different sizes, but that SAF material mixed with that deep ribbing, you almost get a double effect. You get lots of action from the deep ribbing, but you also get a slow fall because it's so wide, it disperses more water. This is a great option if you want to imitate a little bit more of a bait fish. And then the Oka Ebi, I really like using if I'm trying to have a little bit more size, but not actually add too much bulk. These long appendages do wonderful things in the water. And the body size, the actual body profile is pretty small, as you can see. Yeah, there you go. So the Oka Ebi 2.5 inch is another great one. Okay, let's talk rods. Rods for this is, for the most part, pretty straightforward. I'm gonna recommend a middle of the row rod. If you're going with that heavyweight, you're gonna wanna go up to a medium and heavy. Most of these rods I'm gonna recommend are gonna be for the Kiwami down to the cover. For you BFS guys, I went around the shop, I tried to grab a couple different price points, a couple different brands, so you have some options when you're doing this. Let's start with what I think is the best rod all around for all this. That's gonna be the Raid Gladiator Maximum, the Max LT, okay? This is a medium light plus, 6'5" with up to a 3/8 ounce, so about that 10 to 11 gram max weight. You can throw this on BFS if you want. If you want to get a little bit more finessey with the reel, you can use a standard reel with this. I do it all the time. This is just a great rod for all around. It really excels on that type level. So when you're hanging it a little bit, it gives you just a little bit, so it's got some backbone down here, but then with that solid tip, it allows you to move that bait without pulling it out of those key strike zones, lets you flare up that skirting a little bit more. It's just a phenomenal overall rod. It's great with the type cover as well. If you're in a little bit heavier cover, this is one of my favorite all-time rods for more of a micro mini jig style of fishing. Now, if you are a Megabass fan or you're looking for a little bit of a longer rod, the Bait Finesse rod specifically from Megabass is gonna be great for really that type cover style of micro jigs. This is gonna be a 6'10" F3, so sort of a medium light. You're gonna have a lure rating from 1/4 to 5/8 ounce. So 7 grams is where it's saying it's gonna start with. You can go a little bit lighter than that. It has a decent tip on it, but this is gonna be a good one again for that type level, tight cover, just sort of do everything mini jig. Once you add in a trailer and you have your everything on there, you're gonna get to that 1/4 ounce pretty quickly. Just a dope rod from Megabass, and a little bit longer too, which is nice in the BFS. This is not a conventional like BFS style of fishing. So say you want to put like a Metanium 70 on this, totally fine. If you wanted to fish BFS on this, also totally fine. I'm just gonna gradually go down in price point here. Okay, so this is gonna be, again, in the Raid lineup. This is gonna be in the Gladiator Anti. This is gonna be the power bait finesse, so a 6'5". This is more of a, you know, softer, the same thing, stinger tip. It's gonna be great for that type cover, that type level. Another dope rod, 6'5". It's gonna have a lure rating of 3/16 to 3/8. So again, you can kind of get that type cover and that type level really in there. That type Kiwami is when we're gonna have a little bit of issue with this one. It's just a little bit too much rod for that little hook, but everything else, this is gonna be a great rod for. And then another one from Megabass in the Levante lineup. This is one of the JDM ones. This is gonna be the Levante F3, so a medium light again, in that 6'7". It's gonna have a lure rating of 1/8, so 3.5 grams, all the way up to ½ ounce. Type level, type cover, all awesome rods for it. That type Kiwami, now that little one, it's almost too small to be throwing on all of these rods. This is gonna be more for that type of level and that type cover. So just keep that in mind. That type Kiwami is gonna be great on some spinning rods, which we can get to. Now, if you're a spinning guy, and I throw this sometimes on spinning as well, if I'm making long bomb casts out into random cover, I will go with a little bit of a longer rod. Now this is a NRX Plus 902 JWR. It's gonna have a nice soft tip, so 902, 7'6" medium. Great for the cover, great for the level. It has a softer tip section, but actually is very parabolic, is coming down to here, but then once you get to here, it gets pretty stiff. So you can hook up on a long cast. That's what that middle section, you really need that for. And then you keep them pegged even when you get close to the boat. I don't have a lot of trouble with losing fish on this guy. Just pair it up to an Extens 3000. I think I had 18-pound braid on this to a 10-pound fluorocarbon leader. One of my favorite combos all time for throwing this guy. Another cool option, this one's from Megabass. This is gonna be the Megabass Destroyer X10 in the Medusa. This rod really surprised me actually with how good it was for throwing some of these micro jigs. This is traditionally from Megabass. They kind of advertise this as more of a mid-strolling rod, but the great thing is you sort of get that backbone down here. You still get a little bit of parabolic in the middle section, but you have that stinger tip, which allows you to dance the bait a lot without moving it too much, which again, more and more going into fishing is keeping your bait in that strike zone longer is such a key. So the Medusa is another great one. If you're not familiar with the Medusa, this is going to be an F3, so medium light, again, solid tip, 6'11" in the spinning. If you're more close quarter combat, this is gonna be a great one for you. And then this is finally one that I throw that Kiwami on, but I will also throw the cover on. This is the Raid Max Queen. So this is the 6'4" solid tip light. It's gonna have a lure rating up to 1/4. I throw a lot of my mid-strolling baits on this guy, so the 5" with a little head there. One of my all-time favorite rods in the Raid lineup. I can't speak enough good things about this. Again, you're gonna have that solid tip, so you can dance it. It's not gonna move it around too much from the thing, but you can get that skirt really going. And then you're gonna come down into a much stiffer back section. You can see there how there's not very much bend at all in this area. That's the power that you need to get that hook, bring the fish in really nicely. This would be on the lighter side, so cover to Kiwami, and then most of everything else is gonna be that cover and level. Last but not least, a really dope rod that you could use for throwing that smaller size, the Kiwami, is gonna be a baby plugin. So this is a Megabass P5 Destroyer in the baby plugin, F1.5, so light power, 7'2", a little bit longer. It's a pretty parabolic rod. It's actually a really good hard bait rod. For some reason, one day I think I had one of these just sitting on the deck. I had a really good mini jig bite going on, or micro jig bite, sorry, going on. And I wanted to tie up another rod with sort of a lighter one. I grabbed this guy. The hookup ratio for me has been phenomenal. And I just kind of keep a Kiwami on here now almost all the time. So also that Bellows gill is one of the dopest little trailers that you can have if you want to have a little bit more of a slow fall action. If we have the 2" in stock ever, it is a really, really good one. I hope you learned a lot in this video. This is a subject that, you know, we've spent a lot of time sort of curating to make sure we sort of fill everything out for you guys. If you have any more questions, please leave a comment down below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll check you guys again.